Hi, I'm Steve, I'm good at water tanks. Let's learn from some sexy maneuvers that I pulled off in-game. So a multi-level engagement is so fundamentally important to recognise as a game state that I dedicated an entire review to it that you can find up here or in the description, and please, for the love of God, do watch that. It's basically required reading if you want to be as good at water tanks as you can be. In addition to that, I'll be basically talking here as if that video is rather fresh in your mind, so worth watching. Simply put, it works well against unstructured aggression, poorly against non-linear assaults. Now, emerging tentatively from the cap circle here on Live Oaks in my ISM, I quickly come to terms with the idea that I have no like-minded individuals heading to the town with me. In fact, all of our heavies, aside from my good self, are attempting conquest of the Eastern Pass. Let's also quickly note, while I move to my chosen position here, I'm locking off my turret facing the most likely direction of enemy fire. I don't expect to get shot here, nor is it likely, but it's a damn good habit to get into, to lock off your turret facing the most likely area that shells are going to come from. If you keep doing it over time, it's going to save you an amount of hit points that you can then use to violently bludgeon the enemy tanks to death. Of note as well is that when I get shot here, of course my first act is to pull into cover, get myself safe, but I then share that information with my team, that being the tanks that shot me and their approximate location, because knowledge shared by 15 is far more potent than knowledge known by 1. Now, the reason that I find this particular exhibit of a multi-level engagement so stellar is not just because at one point it has 4 levels to it, which, don't say this to every multi-level engagement I see, but that is hard. Or even that our team's aggression on the other flank compensated for the natural weakness of this maneuver. No, it was the fact that it was motivated. It was crafted by necessity. What you're about to see didn't come about as the natural result of people camping at the back of the map and other people attacking into them and then dying, as so often happens in the world of tanks. No. My team adopted the perfect positions in response to a threat, and that should be shown and talked about because it's awesome. So let's watch the map here from the start to the end of this setup and then explain why it's so brilliant. Let's look at the example of a multi-level engagement that I used in my explanation video. Now the map from this game. Now the video. Now side by side. That is pretty much perfect. This is so special to me because I employ this tactic many times when I'm in direct communication, voice chat with my platoon mates, with my allies, I can set it up. However, hoping for some general knowledge of tactical precedence from random teammates gets me killed the vast majority of the time. But here, this 215B saw that its position was compromised and relocated to a more defensive one in due time. The SU-101 also perceived the threat. The STRV actually came out to fight and defend me, and then when I told him to fall back, actually feckin' did. Now, the enemy team lose this game. Now, I die shortly into their push, but that's kind of what this maneuver is designed to do. Punish the enemy for every inch of ground they gain whilst losing the least amount possible. But normally the recourse, the counter for a multi-level engagement is, in principle, as simple as the multi-level engagement itself. The counter is non-linear maneuvers. Here are some examples on Himmelsdorf, Elhaluf, and Mannerheim Line. However, here, and this is another reason this works so perfectly, our team exploited their advantage on the east so swiftly and well that the enemy team's natural counter to the setup we have, which would be pushing a force around the kill zone, right, in the low ground, that can't be done. Because if they were to do that, the chance of being annihilated by crossfire goes up immensely. The only thing I would change about the way my team did this is I would leave the Lurver here. The Lurver has 400 meters of base view range, for some reason. So its presence here, its awareness would make absolutely certain that the enemy couldn't dislodge our tactic with a non-linear counter. But still, this game from a tactical standpoint was played damn near flawlessly by the team, and that's just... it happens so rarely, and I'm very aroused. So I was watching Awesome Epic Guy's stream the other day, and while they were lamenting the new state of the KV2, the topic of +2 -2 matchmaking was brought up. Now I remarked that I personally didn't mind it as much as they seemed to. Edwin or Swatch, with a superficial analysis, remarked that that may just be because I'm very good at the game.
I genuinely like +2 -2 matchmaking, but I'm not
did I say
representing
yes?
the majority of the player base. Yeah, I personally don't understand how +2 is a thing at all. But it could also be that you're just very good at the game.
And while that metaphorical ego boost didn't feel as good as the time he actually sucked my dick, because that man's got some lips, did give me pause for a moment while I pondered the question. Why is it that I don't mind +2 matchmaking? This game is a perfect aid in demoing my conclusion. See, undoubtedly skill plays a part. Right? A good player will be able to adapt and perform in a greater variety of increasingly adverse game states than a bad player. But to a certain extent, setting aside crews and equipment, etc., we're all in the same boat. We abide by the same mechanics, however well or poorly we use them. The reason I don't mind +2 matchmaking, I think, starts at the objective. Many players start a battle hoping for damage, spotting, and bounce shells, whereas for me that often comes as a byproduct of a broader objective, which is to have fun and win the battle. Something that's essential to this is a level of disconnect from the battle before me. I try not to think of the tank that I'm driving as mine, my vehicle, simply a tool on the battlefield to be used to the best of its effectiveness. This helps decision making, because let's say your tier 10 medium tank, right, is trapped, pinned down and going to die. And you've got a tier 8 medium on the battlefield that you can sacrifice to keep him in the game longer. What do? Well, the answer's obvious. Unless you're the tier 8 medium. Because you get nothing. You get no credits, no XP for throwing yourself in front of a tank that's more important to the outcome of the battle. And if you play the game, if what you play the game for is entirely credits, XP, is entirely based on those things, being forced into a circumstance where the responsibility of saving someone else at the cost of your game is a potential obligation is naturally something to resent. However, for me, I love this moment. This part of the game where I was doing my duty. Doing what I thoroughly believed was the right thing to win my team the battle, and making someone else's game better. So I think that's why I don't mind being bottom tier. Because while your damage, XP, your chances might diminish when you are, what's expected of you diminishes too. And I like rising to that challenge, exceeding expectations, which is easier to do when the standards are lesser. At the end of the day, I'd love to say that every tank is equally important, every player matters equally, right? That would be nice, but it's not the case, that's not how it works, and it's no one's fault that that is the case. But that is how it is. A tier 10 tank is more valuable than a tier 8 tank. If you are the tier 8 tank, shut up and accept it. Right? That is how it works. And if you want to win the vast majority of games, you need to learn how to value yourself. And not take offense to the idea that when you get into a bottom tier game, you are less important than most of the tanks around you. That's how it is. Stop being a pussy. So I have some replays coming up which are perfect case studies for something called engagement dictation. And this is another thoroughly important fundamental within World of Tanks. It concerns the relationship between mitigating your weaknesses whilst inhibiting the enemy team's strengths, and the various factors that go into doing that to a high degree of competence no matter the game scenario. So let's look at this, and I do apologise, you're going to have to ignore the smell of jade egg lamenting the map design as we move forward here. We begin with this Carnarvon approaching me from the low ground. Now, engagement dictation is really hard to explain because every situation is going to require a myriad of conclusions based on different factors at play. It's really difficult. So what I will do is try and boil it down to basic fundamentals and show you what my approach is in any situation. Hopefully then you can start to implement it in your gameplay as well. The first step for engagement dictation is to take stock of your weaknesses. And this is the first step because it's the easiest. Right? Even if you're a beginner, you're not very good, you have these stats in the garage. The dynamics of your tank that you can tailor. It is the one thing within this entire principle that you can dictate and have control over. It's the only thing you can be sure of knowing the nuances of beyond a shadow of a doubt. Right? So that certainty builds the basis on which we work out to implement the principles of this maneuver. Does that sound right? We'll roll with it. In this case, the T-34's biggest weaknesses are undoubtedly its DBM and its hull armor, both of which are unmistakably tragic. These weaknesses of a vehicle define its playstyle as much as its strengths, those being gun depression, penetration, and decent turret armor. So we can say, okay, this vehicle wants to be hull down to use its turret, at mid to close range to mitigate its accuracy, preferably slightly above the enemy to hide its roof over match point, with teams surrounding it to mitigate its long reload. Notice that all of those are conclusions that we can draw before even clicking the battle button, before even hitting the battlefield. And you can do this with every single tank. In fact, one of the best ways to discover the playstyle that a tank is going to function best in is to look at what it's worst at. Works for me. Now we move on to stage 2. Inhibiting the enemy team's strengths. For this, it's most helpful to apply exactly the same logic we just did, but in reverse. This is more difficult, because you don't know specifics about their setup and the nuances of their equipment. Assumptions have to be made. Take this example of the Carnarvon. What are the strengths of this vehicle? Well, mainly DPM, turret armor, and gun depression. Okay, well, what are the weaknesses? Mobility and reasonably poor hull armor. So I immediately ask 2 questions whenever I look at an engagement. 1. What is the worst case scenario given the circumstances? 2. How do I stop that from happening? For number 1, I'm being approached by an enemy tank with more HP and way more DPM than me. The worst case scenario is for him to get in close on level ground, because my hull armor, like his, is terrible. I'm assuming that we're both gonna pen every single shot, and that he can put out way more damage than me in close quarters. In a fair fight, I lose. For number 2, how do I stop that happening? Well, it's clear I have to stop him from getting close. Right now, I'm lucky. I spotted him early, moving in soft terrain. His mobility is further compromised. I'm above him slightly. Right now, he can't exploit my weaknesses, which is my long reload and my hull armor. In a few moments, he will be able to. So I absolutely have to trade with him now, even if I take damage. The fact is, in this fight, I'm going to take hits. But hit points, as always, are thought of as a tool. In this case, one to be used to prevent the situation from becoming worse. Obviously, alpha damage is an important factor here. My 400 on the T-34 versus the Carnarvon's 280. And the difference in alpha damage can be very important, well, it absolutely is very important when looking at how to dictate an engagement. Think of it like this. If two tanks have 3,200 dBm, but one has 800 alpha and the other one has 400, mathematically, the tank with 800 alpha has a longer reload, which means it has to do less active work to enforce its dBm. If this 800 alpha damage tank wants to achieve that 3,200 dBm, it only has to fire once every 15 seconds. However, for this 400 alpha tank to do it, it has to fire every 7.5 seconds. It's more work. So, if this high alpha tank can say to this lower alpha tank, okay, no, we're going to go shot for shot, I'm going to shoot you, you're going to shoot me, but then I'm going to put you in a situation where you can't shoot in the next 7.5 seconds. In fact, no, I'm going to hide for 15 seconds. So you have an additional 7.5 seconds where you're not firing, right? If you can dictate that state of gameplay, if you can allow yourself in the tank with the higher alpha damage and the longer reload to be in cover longer whilst the enemy is reloaded, by doing that, by dictating the engagement, you are reducing the active DPM and the active power of that tank. Purely by dictating the engagement. That's exactly what I'm doing here, and it allows me to win an engagement that on paper I'm at a severe disadvantage in. So, we join myself here pretty much screwed. The numerical and positional disadvantage we are at here is so potent there's just no way we can win this flank. As you can see, I'm already turning in an attempt to run away and find a more defensive position. Now, I managed to pick up a kill on the way out, and at this point I'm looking at the map. I'm aware that we have an AMX in position to support me, so I try and pull myself out wide so that if anyone wants to engage me, they're more likely to expose themselves to his line of fire. Now, it's a short while later when I get encroached upon by the enemy Type 59 and Batchat, so I'm immediately thinking, 1, what's the worst case scenario? 2, how do I stop it? Well, for number 1, if they get around and into the cover of the low ground, then the AMX will miss all his shots and I will die. How can I stop that? Well, as they move in, I move up and out of my low ground to engage because I want to take the fight in an area where my AMX has clean shots, and that would be the highest ground available. If I can force them to stay high, it's more likely that they'll die. I ram into the Type to both prevent him from getting into cover and to stop his movement, making him an easier kill. And this works perfectly, the AMX in the end actually picking up both kills with some impressive shooting. And again, a fight that we were expected to lose, one because we picked when and where it took place. This is a last minute addition, something that I really enjoyed getting within my ELC even 90 here. I'm attacking this WZ at the end of the game. I'm unloading shells into and about to kill him when my Dystonia makes me reload with 1 shell left in the chamber. A bit shit. No, I mean, it's not exactly dramatic, he's 1 shot away from dead, we're going to win, but it's just the sheer balls that I have to pull this maneuver. Deadass, heart-stopping right in front of him, predicting that he would fire in front of me is one of the most manly things I've done in a while, and I quite enjoyed that. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Come join us on Twitch. You got a link in the description. Thank you very much. And we have a Patreon page if you're interested in supporting the content. Other than that, I recommend checking out the Stream Shenanigans playlist. Here's a clip. Oh, Tom! Avenge the VK train! Avenge her! For fuck's sake, Tom!
What's happening back there? I left you in confidence, Tom.
You had one job!
And you fail.
Oh no. You can find that up here. Thank you very much, and farewell.